Currently, the American state of Indiana has 11 men and 1 woman sentenced to death for their crimes. The woman is Deborah Brown. You can find a link in the description below, explaining her case. Here we're going to talk about the remaining 11 men. William Clyde Gibson. Gibson was sentenced to death in 2013, for the April 19, 2012 murder of 75-year-old family friend, Christine Whitus. He killed Whitus, sexually assaulted her and mutilated her corpse. Gibson has also pleaded guilty to the murder of Stephanie Kirk. Kirk's body was found buried in the backyard of Gibson's New Albany home in April 2012. He was sentenced to death in that case as well. In April 2014, Gibson received a 65-year sentence for the murder of Karen Hodella. Police say Hodella is the first person Gibson killed, a 44-year-old Florida woman, found stabbed to death near the Ohio River in Clarksville, Indiana. Frederick Bear. On the afternoon of February 25, 2004, Corey Clark and her 4-year-old daughter were alone in their home near Lapel. Her 7-year-old daughter was at school and her husband was outside the state. Bear entered the residence and used a knife to slit the throat of Corey Clark, then chased down 4-year-old Jenna and slit her throat as well. Bear had attempted to rape Corey before her death. Bear had been working at a nearby construction site that day, left work, committed the murders, then returned to the job. The apparent motive was to feed a drug habit and a deviant sexual appetite. Bear also faces rape and burglary charges in Marion and Hamilton counties. Frederick Bear was sentenced to death on June 9, 2005. Eric D. Holmes. Holmes was fired from his job at a restaurant after an argument with co-worker Amy Fauci. At closing on the day of his firing, Holmes waited in the parking lot with Michael Vance. Holmes and Vance attacked Fauci and 2 managers as they exited the building, stabbing them multiple times, and stealing the bank deposit money. Blosel and Irvin died. Fauci survived. Vance was tried separately and sentenced to 190 years. Eric D. Holmes was sentenced to death on March 26, 1993. Kevin Isom. In February 2013, 50-year-old Kevin Isom was convicted of 3 counts of murder in the shooting deaths of his wife, 40-year-old Cassandra Isom, and stepchildren 16-year-old Michael Moore and 13-year-old Andrea Cole. All 3 of his family members were shot multiple times at the family's apartment, in the Miller section of Gary. A few weeks before the murders, Isom was fired from his job as a security guard. Days before the killings, Cassandra had talked about leaving Isom because she was paying all the bills. The couple was married 12 years and 1 day. Kevin Isom was sentenced to death on February 4, 2013. Wayne D. Kubsch. September 18, 1998 was the 31st birthday of Kubsch's wife, Elizabeth Kubsch. It was also the day she was found dead by her 13-year-old son under the stairs in the basement of the home she shared with the defendant. She had been stabbed numerous times, and was hog-tied with duct tape. Also discovered in the basement were the bodies of Elizabeth's former husband, Rick Milewski, and their 10-year-old son from that marriage, Aaron Milewski. Aaron had been stabbed 21 times and shot once in the mouth. Rick had been stabbed in the heart and shot twice in the head. Kubsch claimed to have worked all day, then went straight to pick up his other son in Michigan. However, cell phone records put him in the vicinity of the murder at the time of the murders. Duct tape from Elizabeth was matched to a wrapper in his vehicle. A receipt that was received by Elizabeth 2 hours before the murder was also found in his vehicle. Kubsch was overheard bragging about the murders at a local restaurant. He was over $400,000 in debt, and 2 months before the murders had taken out a life insurance policy on the life of Elizabeth, for $575,000. Kubch was sentenced to death on April 18, 2005. Michael Dean Overstreet. Kelly Eckhart was an 18-year-old freshman, attending Franklin College, working her way through school with a part-time job at Walmart. On September 27, 1997, she left work, met briefly with her boyfriend, and drove towards her home in Shelby County. That was the last time she was seen alive. The next morning, her car was found abandoned in a rural area, with its lights on, and keys in the ignition. 4 days later, the partially nude body of Kelly Eckhart was found in a ravine in Brown County. She had been strangled with her own shoestring, and a strap, cut from the suspenders of her overalls. She had also been shot once in the forehead. Semen was discovered on the victim, which was later matched through DNA analysis, as having been contributed by Overstreet. Overstreet's brother first contacted the police, and admitted that the defendant called him on the 27th, he had met him at a hotel, drove his van, and transported him and a girl to a remote wooded area where he dropped them off. Overstreet returned later and moved the body to Brown County. Fibers found on the victim's body matched those from the Overstreet's van, which he had spent several hours cleaning before the victim's body was found. An eyewitness identified Overstreet near the dump site on the day the body was recovered. Overstreet was convicted of murder, rape and confinement. He was sentenced to death on July 31, 2000. Benjamin Donnie Ritchie. Ritchie was involved in a police chase after he was spotted driving a stolen vehicle. The chase ended when he wrecked the vehicle and proceeded on foot before shooting Officer William Toney in the chest. William died days later. Benjamin Ritchie was sentenced to death on October 15, 2002. Roy Lee Ward. 15-year-old Stacy Payne, and her 14-year-old sister, Melissa, were home alone in their rural Dale home, when Ward entered and attacked Stacy with a knife. Melissa had taken a nap upstairs and was awakened by Stacy's screams. From the top of the stairs, Melissa saw Ward on top of Stacy. She called 911 and heard Stacy pleading, "Stop," while Ward said, "You better be quiet." Ward was still at the scene, covered with blood and pocket knife in hand, when police arrived. Stacy Payne's torso was nearly sliced in two, her throat was cut to her windpipe, and her wrist was slashed to the bone. Nevertheless, she was alive for a short time. Vaginal bruising, and Stacy's DNA on Ward's genitals, supported the rape and criminal deviant conduct charges. Ward was on probation for a burglary in Missouri at the time of the crime, and had a dozen prior convictions for public indecent exposure. He was convicted of murder, rape, and criminal deviant conduct. Roy Lee Ward was sentenced to death on December 18, 2002. Jeffrey Allen Weishite. Jeffrey Weishite was convicted of murdering 8-year-old Elisa Lynch, and 5-year-old Caleb Lynch, and of arson resulting in serious bodily injury. He confessed to police that he knew the kids were in the house when he set the fire on April 10, 2010. The kids were the children of his fiancée, Lisa Lynch, who shared the home with Weishite. She was at work at the time of the fire. Jeffrey Weishite was sentenced to death in 2013. Joseph Edward Corcoran. At 17, Joseph Corcoran was accused of shooting his parents because they were too strict. A jury, though, was unconvinced, and Corcoran went free. 5 years later, in July 1997, Corcoran was again charged with murder, this time accused of gunning down his brother, his sister's fiancé, and 2 other men, because he couldn't stand to hear them talking about him. The victims were 30-year-old Douglas A. Stilwell, 30-year-old James Corcoran, 32-year-old Robert Scott Turner, and 30-year-old Timothy G. Bricker. Corcoran was sentenced to death on August 26, 1999. All 10 inmates are held at Indiana State Prison, in Michigan City.